Hey everyone. So I'm going to start with the basics of Docker, like installing Docker, and then we'll proceed from thereafter. So I have a Vagrant installed on my Windows machine, and I have just started the VM. So on my uh, PowerShell prompt, I'm going to use Vagrant SSH to log into my uh, Linux VM that I have just created. I have created this as a Ubuntu 16.04 machine now. It doesn't really matter where the VM is running. Currently, I have that running on my local machine. This can be on the cloud. This can be a AWS VM. This can be a Google or Azure VM or anywhere that you have created. As long as the Linux machine is supporting virtualization or allows kernel sharing, which is of course inbuilt characteristic of Linux. So we should be able to install Docker on that. So I'm going to start with installing Docker, and I have a document that I'm going to refer to. And these are some of the instructions. I'm going to copy that one by one. So to start with, I'm going to run. Let me get into sudo mode, and here I'm going to say apt get update to start. Let this run. I'm going to add run a command to install a few additional components that we are going to need for Docker to run or Docker to work. Okay, so I have these three things that I'm going to install. This might take some time, so you'll have to wait through the installation process. And then I'm going to further install a few more packages and applications after we get this completed. So I'm going to pause the installation, the video for the installation process to complete, and then we'll resume after that. Okay. Okay, now that we have completed the initial installation process of installing some additional Linux components, I'm going to proceed with installing few more um, packages, and that's going to be this way. So I'll show you what we have installed, and this is what we are trying to install in this process. I'm trying to install apt transport HTTPS packages, CS certificates, curl, software properties common, and it seems like most of these are already present on my system, so no need to install anything separately in here. Okay, now further to that, I'm going to add the GPG key for the Docker downloader site. So I've done that using the curl command, and these commands and set of commands you will be able to find on the docker.io site in the documentation. And this is where from I have picked up all these documents and also these commands as well. So you can get to that easily located on the Docker documentation. And further to that, I'm going to add the apt repository entry for download.docker.com. So now with that, I have my repos.d folder updated with an entry for Docker downloader site, and I'll be then running the apt update. So I should be able to see my Docker downloader link has got updated, and now my repos.d folder or apt repositories are updated with the link to the download.docker.com. And with that, we will be able to now install Docker CE. And the reason I'm going to use is Docker CE is it's the community edition, and it's the open source version of Docker. There's also other package or application that is available from Docker, that is Docker EE, which is enterprise version of Docker, and the Docker CE stands for Docker Community Edition. Prior to releasing this Docker CE version, there was also one more version that was available, that was Docker.io, which comes as an integral part and part of the Ubuntu apt repository. But we won't be downloading that, and some of the features may not be available in the Docker.io very initial version of Docker. So it's recommended that you install Docker CE package always. And let me copy the link here. So it's going to download Docker CE for me. Let us wait for it to complete. Okay, so now we have got Docker CE installed, and let me try running the Docker command. Yes, I'm able to get Docker executable or the Docker program running. Let's try to see what version that we have got installed in here, and I can see the client and server version as 18.0 9.7, which is the latest one, which is released on June 27th, 2019. So that's quite latest, fairly latest version as such that we have. Now, the very first thing that I'll talk about is some of the commands that we can see in here. So let me just scroll up. So these are the usual commands that you will use for running through the Docker. Creating containers, creating images, working through the images and containers. You all will be using these commands. Along with that, you also have some of the management related commands wherein you'll be able to create the builds, Docker configuration, containers, container management, and so on. So these are some of the management commands that you will see. We'll see how it works later on while we look at the Docker overall working as such. So I'm going to start with the basic uh, understanding about Docker, how we start with pulling the Docker image. Now, as we discussed earlier, to create a container, what we need is a Docker image. So image is the the basic component that is needed for the container to run. What we get inside the image is the file system of the related operating system. Okay, so I'm going to pull Ubuntu related image. So what I mean by Ubuntu image is this image is going to have Ubuntu file system related components, and once we use this image to create a container, we'll have Ubuntu container up and running. Similar to that, we will also pull CentOS image, and then we'll be able to create containers using these images. I'll see what size and how much data that we are downloading for the Ubuntu as well as for CentOS. I'm going to download that. Now here I am not specifying any version, and the tag or the version that it is default to is the latest version, which means whatever that is currently available on the Docker repository, that is Docker Cloud repository, which is also called as Docker Hub, is the latest version. So if you do not specify any specific version, then Docker will consider it to be the latest version, and you'll be able to get the latest version onto your Docker host. And it creates a local registry and keeps all these images into the local registry on this Docker host itself. Okay, once we have this downloaded, I'll list out all the images by using Docker images command. That will show us all the images that we currently have on our local machine, and by which we will be able to create the containers. You see what size of data that we are downloading in here. So it has downloaded that, and now it is extracting that file, and then we will be able to use that image. So let me run docker images command here. You'll see that I have Ubuntu and a CentOS image. Look at the size of that. The CentOS image is around 202 MB, whereas the Ubuntu image is around 64 MB. Now these images are released 3 weeks back and 4 months back, and that is fairly, uh, latest and updated images as such. Let me clear the screen one more time. Now that we have an image downloaded, I'm going to create a container. So I can do that by using create docker create command, and then what I want to create is a container. So using create command or create option, I'll be able to create a container, but this won't start the container. Okay, I'll have to use a separate start option to start the container later. And in what fashion that I want to create this container, that I'll have to specify here. Is it going to be an interactive container, or do I want to have that created in a detached fashion? That I'll have to define in here. When I say -it, this represents that I'm going to start the container or create a container rather in an interactive fashion. I can do that in the detached fashion as well. For now, I'm going to put that IT, and I'm going to then specify the image name here. It should be good enough for me now. So I'm going to run that, and it created a container, but it hasn't started. And this is what we get is the container ID. Now to understand what all images and what all containers that we have, I'm going to run docker ps command to know what all containers that we currently have on this machine. So if I run ps command, I'll not be able to see anything. PS is going to tell me if I have any containers running. And if I want to see a running and stopped container altogether, I'm going to use -a option to list out all the containers that are stopped and in running state. And this is the container ID that we see. It is using an image, Ubuntu. What command that it is embedded with is the bin bash. So which means that when I start the container, uh, this command would be executed inside the container, allowing me to have an interactive shell prompt. This is created 33 seconds back, and the status is created. It hasn't started, or it's not in running state. Now, if I want to start this, what should I do? I'm going to run docker start command. Then how do I reference this particular container? That's going to be by the container ID. So if I use docker start, I should see the container in a start state. Let us have ps command. Now this time with docker ps command, I'm going to get the started container. So the status is now changed to up for 7 seconds. It has also allocated a random name to this container. Now we all need to keep one thing in mind, that containers are such objects which cannot be modified once those are created, which means that if I want to make any changes, if I think of making any changes to the container name or the command or the port mapping, I will not be able to do that. So if I have to change the name of the container, I should make sure that at the time of the starting the container itself, I'm allocating a name to that. Okay, now how do I get inside this container? We have started this container in interactive fashion, so I should be able to enter and log into that container, and I'll be able to do that using docker attach command. Again, this time I'm going to refer the container by the container ID, and with that I'm inside the container. Remember, we had the last command that was executed inside the container, that was bin bash, which allowed us to have an interactive shell prompt. Now, the first command that I would like to run inside the container is the listing of files. And you see, this is the file system that we see inside the container. These are all uh, Ubuntu related files and folders, and you should be able to see related programs running inside in there. Okay, you should be able to run apt get update command in here, which of course is an Ubuntu specific command which has aptitude repository and package management. So with that, you can understand that we are actually having Ubuntu related applications and packages also available inside this container. I'm further going to install an application on this container, and then I'm going to showcase how the layers inside the image can be seen. And also we'll be able to see uh, or use one of the option to understand how the container is behaving, what all different details that we will should be able to see for a container using a Docker inspect option. So let this complete. Okay, so I'm going to further go ahead and install apt using apt-get. I'm going to install Apache 2. Okay, yes. Now remember, we are doing all this on the container. These changes, these applications are actually affecting the addition of files inside the container and not on the host. So if I come out of this container, you won't see Apache package or application installed. This is getting installed inside the container. So container is my runtime application environment currently in which I am working. Now, once this is completed, we are going to come out of this container, and I can do that by using the control PQ uh, combination of keys. I'm going to show you that that will help me to come out of the container without stopping the container. Okay, now here if I type exit command, what this will do is it will help me to come out of the container. At the same time, it's going to stop the container. Now I don't want to do that. I still want to come out of the container, but at the same time, I want to have the container running. So that's going to happen with the key control plus PQ. So you're going to have the control PQ uh, key combination to have run the escape sequence. Now, if I run docker ps here, I should be able to see that container running. Okay, so that's up and running. Now, I'm going to use docker inspect command to get some insight into the container. Okay, so right, that has put a lot of information on the screen. Let's scroll up and see what it gives us. So it's going to show us the container ID, the time of creation, path at which we have executed the last command. So this is the command that helped us to get the shell prompt. This is going to give us the state of the container and all the information related to that. And the information is passed in form of Boolean operators. It's also going to show us the image ID that it has used for starting this container and all the information related to image information, resolve configuration. So these are some of the default paths where the container related files and folders are getting created on the host. Okay, so that's and this is going to be the path. So all the Docker related files are actually available on varlib Docker folder. Inside that you will have a containers folder, and there'll be a folder created by the container ID. If I get inside this folder, I'll be able to see all the different folders which are related to the containers that we might create on this, or if I want to create more containers, you will see all those containers related folders inside this path. So that's going to be a default location where the containers are going to be storing all the data and related files. I'm going to show you a few more important details and then we'll move ahead. Okay, so here you have network settings related information, and this information talks about the network settings on the container. What are the details it's using? It's using gateway as this. So it's actually 172.17.0.1. Now remember, you'll see a different subnet here, and the default one is 172.17.0. The gateway is defaulted to the host, and the IP address that's been allocated, a dynamic IP that's been allocated to this container, is in the same subnet, that is 172.17, and the current one is 02. If I create one more container, probably the other container will have a 03, 04, and so on. Now, where this particular gateway is, okay, I'm going to run a config command on here, and you'll be able to see some of the network interfaces that we have on the host, and in there you will be able to see a Docker 0 network interface. Now this is actually interface or an Ethernet adapter that got added when we installed Docker on this machine, and you will see that the adapter has been allocated with an IP address in the range of 172.17.0.1. So you can see that this adapter is responsible and it's going to work as a bridge and allow all the containers that are going to get created on this host to have network connections and a network setup, a subnet made available to all the containers to communicate with each other. Okay, and the subnet mask is of course 255.255.0.0. Okay, let me clear the screen one more time. If I run Docker images here, I have these two images. I'm going to perform some insight into the images that we have. So let's understand how the images are actually, created and how the different layers are stacked on one on each, and then how the final image gets created as such. I'm going to run Docker history command here, and then I'm going to supply the image ID. So this will show me the images information. So for this particular image, what are different layers that we see? So there are currently 5 layers. You won't have any information for these missing image IDs, and those are actually masked image IDs, and you won't be able to see that. Now this image is been made available by Debian, which is a Ubuntu image, and it has all these layers that are added. Looks like this is the file that has been added, or set of files that have been added, which corresponds to around 63.2 MB, more related to the file system of Ubuntu that we are currently seeing inside the container. Along with that, it had executed apt-get index targets. This probably added a size of 987 KB to that. Then there are a couple of other commands that also added few more bytes. Then it created a folder in there and updated some of the strings into that in one of the file that also added some data. And at the end, it is running a cmd instruction with the argument as bin bash. Now, this is the one that as I said, is allowing us to have an shell prompt once we create a container using this image. Okay. Now, how this works, how these details got into the image, we'll see that later on once we start looking at the Docker file. So Docker file is the one which is responsible or which can help us to get the image created with all the such instructions that we want to embed inside an image as such. Okay, let me clear the screen one more time. Uh, Now, if I want to stop the container that we had started, I have instruction as docker stop and then container ID. All that you want to refer to container is with the container ID itself, or you can use the container name as well. If I want to uh, have the container name given differently, I won't be able to, of course, do that. If I want to start a new container, I'm going to have docker run command used. Now, docker run command will help me to create a container and start the container at the same time. Now, how do I want to start that? Is it interactive or detached? Again, this time I'm going to use the interactive mode of starting the container. I'm also going to define what image that I want to use. Now, this time I'm going to use CentOS image. Okay, and I'm going to have a name parameter here that's going to be hyphen name is equal to my container and then the image name. So I'm going to start that. So it has started the container for me. Let us try to run something in there. And you will see that it's actually a CentOS or Red Hat related file system in there. Okay. I'm going to type an exit here. That will stop the container and help me to exit from the container. If I run docker -a command, I should this time see two containers running, rather two containers created, and both of them are currently stopped. And the one that we recently created has a specific name. So you also got to know that if I want to have a name allocated of my choice to a container, I have a key as hyphen name here. Okay. Okay, my next session, I'm going to have a few more commands related to Docker talked about, and then we'll see uh, in another session how we use Docker file to create Docker images. Thanks for joining.